Hi, everybody. Mr. Gonzalez here. Let's go over our circulatory respiratory notes for our test coming up. So let's start with the respiratory. How do organisms exchange gases? So we talked about what are the gases that all these organisms are exchanging. And we said the two are oxygen and carbon dioxide. And we didn't mean exchange between plant and animal. Anytime on a test you see the word exchange gases, it just means with the environment. So we take oxygen in and we release carbon dioxide into the environment. Okay, the whole point of taking oxygen is to remember, perform cellular respiration for energy and making ATP. So we said there's 3 body systems involved in providing this ATP. Respiratory gives you the oxygen you need. Digestive gives you the glucose you need. And circulatory transports the two to each and every one of your cells. So then we use some organisms in the world to show you how each of them exchange gases differently. So we started with unicellular, single-celled organisms like amoebas. They do it with diffusion. So a lot of oxygen on the outside diffuses in, high to low. Fish, we said, use gills. They take oxygen from the water, which is called dissolved oxygen, and they pass water past their gills, and the oxygen diffuses into their blood. Worms breathe through their skin, and we talked about how when it rains, why they all come out of the dirt, and it's because remember, they get oxygen from the air, not water, and so the porous soil fills up with water, and so they need to come out. The next one is insects, and they use spiracles, and if you check in your notes, we drew a bug, and we pointed where the spiracles are on the side of their body. Amphibians, the masters of gas exchange, they actually do it 3 different ways. Tadpoles, when they're little babies, they use gills, and then frogs, adult frogs can breathe through their skin and also have lungs. And birds, mammals, reptiles have lungs. So the main parts you need to know for your respiratory system, we have an amazing picture in our notes on this, but nasal cavity, know the larynx, your voice box, then the trachea, the tube that comes down. The trachea separates into the bronchi, which are the 2 tubes that separate into each lung. And then inside the lung, you have the bronchioles, which are the tiny branches. And then at the very end, you have the alveoli, or alveoli. And then that sad-looking face thing under the lungs is the diaphragm, which is the muscle that contracts to help you inhale. Nasal cavity. The main job of the nasal cavity is the first line of defense. It filters out all kinds of dust particles and stuff using mucus and hair. And it also moistens and heats up the air before it reaches your lungs. And also detects odor. So if you leave the gas on in your house, you can survive. The larynx and your trachea. This is your voice box. And we said that it's also the voice box is the larynx and the trachea is the windpipe. And we said the shape of the larynx controls the pitch. So on the picture of the left is when you're not talking. So that's someone just breathing. And then as soon as you start talking, you close up the muscles. And if you stretch them out really, really tight, you get a higher pitch. And if they are less stretched, they get a lower pitch. So we talked about voice a little bit. And that is a picture of your voice box. The lungs. Okay, branching out into the lungs, remember the bronchi, going into the bronchioles, and the main important part of the lungs is the alveoli. The end of your lungs is this whole, in this middle picture, this sort of grape-looking thing. Surrounding the alveoli, these tiny little air sacs, is blood. And why that's important is this is where oxygen in the air goes from your lungs into your blood. And so diffusion occurs here. Diffusion from the lungs, high, to low. Since there's not a lot of oxygen in the blood, it goes from high to low, and oxygen diffuses in. Okay, circulatory system. That's pretty gross. But that's vessels all in your hand. And so let's do transport systems. We'll start with plants. Plants, we said, transport glucose, water, nutrients. Okay? Now there's two ways they transport, phloem and xylem. What are they transporting from the leaves? Well, remember, the leaves is where they make the glucose, their food. So the leaves have to transport food down. And food is transported by the phloem, which flows down. And xylem is water being transported up the plant. And nutrients from the soil as well. Okay, in humans, transport is the circulatory system, and we said there's three types of vessels. There's arteries, which are named because they move blood away from the heart. Veins move blood back to the heart. Remember, they all start with the same good letters. And then the capillaries are the tiny, teeny, teeny, tiny vessels which transport to each cell. And remember, we said they're so small that red blood cells move single file through capillaries. Two types of circulation. Pulmonary circulation, which is circulation from heart to lungs back to heart. And systemic circulation is circulation from heart to body to heart again. Now, the reason that it's pulmonary is written as blue to red, the word pulmonary, is because, remember, you're going to the lungs to pick up oxygen. So the word pulmonary is blue first, and then I made it red second, so you know it's coming back fresh. And the reason systemic is written red-blue is that the beginning of the word systemic I made red because that's coming out of your heart, going to your body cells. Your body cells use up all this oxygen and sort of dirty up, deoxygenate the blood, and then turn blue. Here's another example. This is pretend your leg, okay? So oxygenated blood comes from the heart. That's an artery. Why? Because it's moving away from the heart. Goes into your leg where your cells use up the oxygen. Carbon dioxide fills up your blood and becomes deoxygenated. They should have called it carbonated blood. Anyway, and then that's a vein because it's going back to the heart. Your heart diagram. Now, I haven't labeled anything because you have the labels. You can also look up in your book, but I will show you, I'll talk about the parts and show you the pathway. This is the diagram you got, but be prepared on your test to get any diagram that looks maybe a little different angle, but everything is the same in the heart, okay? All the parts are always the parts. Not trying to fool you, but the Regents does come up with brand new drawings every now and then. So here we go. We'll start off where blood enters. Blood is, I'm going to use blue arrows because the blood is deoxygenated, and it enters here from the tube, which is the vena cava, into this arrow, which is the right atrium, okay? The right atrium is at the top and goes to the right ventricle, which is the bottom, and then gets pumped out to the pulmonary artery. Now, how do I know it's pulmonary? Because it's got to get cleaned. It's got to go to the lungs, and pulmonary, anytime you hear that word, means lungs. So this pulmonary artery, going away from the heart, goes to the lungs and gets pumped out either side here, and then comes back the pulmonary vein. The pulmonary vein brings clean blood back into the left atrium, down to the left ventricle, and gets pumped out of the aorta. And the aorta brings fresh blood to the rest of the body. Your brain, your feet, your legs, okay? So that's the aorta, very important. And this is a colored diagram. Again, a different picture, but showing the same thing. Okay, and last but not least, we did this little diagram in our notebook. This was from a Regents question. And things you may be asked on the test are like, know the chambers, like what's 3, 4, 5, 6, and what do the vessels represent? For example, if I ask you what 7 is, the one on the upper right, well, what's entering in the heart on that side of the heart, which is the left side of the heart at number 4? Well, the thing that's entering is coming from the lungs. That would be the pulmonary vein. So number 7 is the pulmonary vein. What would be number 8? Number 8 is the aorta. Number 1 is the vena cava, and number 2 is the pulmonary artery. Okay? So just know that from our diagram, which we went over. So, all right. Good luck, guys.